Welcome back to the channel. You might be surrounded by Vespa looking scooters everywhere, but one thing that Yamaha did was make a scooter that doesn't really have that scooter look. This is a rugged off-roadish type of scooter, and it appeals to a lot of riders that like scooters but yet don't want that weird Vespa looking type of scooter. This is very polarizing. I know the looks, it's either you love it or you hate it, and there's many copies. This has been very successful for Yamaha because even the Chinese have been copying this like crazy. I am seeing these just absolutely everywhere. But in this video, we're gonna look around and talk about this bike, a Yamaha Zuma 125. So let's talk about up here. First of all, you have two funky headlights that look like BMW designed them. They're quirky, and by the way, one is a low beam, one is a high beam. When you turn on high beams in most bikes, both of these light up, but for some reason Yamaha made it in such a way that only one goes up and down. And it's very interesting. Yamaha usually has like some sort of Morse code type of design, and I believe this pattern here is the Morse code. They did that, the same thing in the Yamaha C3. They usually put that, even Toyota puts Morse code into the design of their cars. And notice this, if you look at it from the side, this headlight has got a beak. It almost looks like an off-roadish beak, but on this, there's nothing. Why is it? It's just so strange looking that it makes it so appealing. I love the looks of it. So up front, you have a 12-inch tire along with the rear, both 12 inches. The PCX, for example, is a 14-inch. The SH150 is a 16. So this is on the lower end of the spectrum. Rotors up front, and look at this. This has got ABS in the front. The brakes on this are really quite good. And the brakes are also combined, front and rear. If you notice, not a lot of scooters come with this sort of thread pattern from the factory. Another thing you'll notice right away, which is very non-traditional to a scooter, is a front fender, a high front fender. That is taking a little bit of the off-road styling and bringing it here. This is an alarming large front fender. And of course, these bikes come stock with a kind of a off-roadish tire. I haven't seen a lot of these Zumas go off-road, but I imagine with this sort of thread pattern, it would work out fairly well, but the tires are small. So it's not you're not going to be rolling over crazy obstacles. But they do work fairly well, and I do intend on testing this bike a little bit off-road. It probably does well like forest roads. People, especially if you're doing courier work, you want a flat floorboard for its utility. And there you have it. Yamaha gave you a flat floorboard. I keep getting a lot of people, including Squirrely, talk about how this is an amazing thing to have, and it is. There's a downside to this. It is so high that you have to lift your feet up a little bit more than what feels natural. It feels too high. I wish it was like lower. And I think this is the only way of doing it. But I wish there was like a manufacturer that could maybe put the feet just a little slightly lower and have some way of still creating a flat floorboard by having some mechanical way of covering it. I find that the hump in the middle doesn't really affect me as much, but some people really must have the flat floorboard, and the Yamaha Zuma 125 is one of these bikes that still has it. Keeping with Yamaha tradition, you have an extremely large exhaust. The exhaust on this actually sounds fairly nice for a scooter, but it is extremely large, and Yamaha does this a lot on their bikes. They're interested in sound, which is something that we can appreciate as consumers. There's a lot of plastic surrounding the exhaust so you don't get burned. If you were to remove the plastic, of course, it would look just more like a traditional scooter. Another thing that Yamaha did is put another disc brake in the rear. These are combined disc brakes, and it's one of the best stopping scooters I've had. It works really well, and the swing arm is rather strange. I've never seen something like this on a scooter, but it goes with the look of it. It's like a rugged type of scooter, so the styling is very not traditional, which I do appreciate about this particular scooter. It is really a cool looking scooter, and You do have foot pegs for your passenger, and they kind of push in and out very strangely. They're almost like a switchblade knife. I haven't kind of figured out like the real way of like closing it. Oh my God, that is so obnoxious. The way you extract them is you push in and out, but it's so quirky because once you do that, you want to like, okay, I want to put it back. You can't. It only works if you go like that. Push it out, it works. That's the only way. If you try to do this, come on, I want it in. It doesn't work, so you have to do it like that. Suspension on scooters is always lacking, and it's the same thing with this. It's lacking, but it does have a progressive spring. It's tightly wound right here in the middle, and then it's loose here on each end. The suspension, yeah, it's lacking. I think there is a demand for good suspension that's affordable for scooters. Yamaha's got a new technology called Blue Core. And Blue Core is a technology that was developed by Yamaha for its engines. It focuses on optimizing combustion efficiency, improving cooling efficiency, and reducing power loss to enhance fuel efficiency and performance. At this obnoxiously large fender, it sure keeps the rain out from the back, but it is just abnormally large. And I think most people would just probably chop it off right here. It would look much better. One of the things you'll find is that you have a very interesting taillight. I do like this taillight. It goes with the looks of the bike. But then again, Yamaha put these clunky old styled blinkers that you still found like in the early 2000s. I would imagine that Yamaha would possibly trade these for something a little bit better. Drivetrain, this is a very large airbox. One thing I appreciate about this particular design, it's like less plastic than most scooters. Most scooters, to get to the removing parts of the airbox or the transmission, you have to remove a piece of plastic. Same in the PCX. This, I like that it's just right here and very easy to get to. All the bolts are accessible, so it's very good for mechanics, home mechanics, to be able to get their bikes serviced. These scooters, they tend to come with a kickstand and the center stand. There's something really interesting about the center stand. I find that it's very easy to pull down. Some scooters have it a little bit more streamlined, makes it hard to pull down. But one of the things that happens is that if you're doing a lot of stop and go riding, like stopping, going at the stores, coming out, courier sort of work, you have the key on, you just kind of push this down, it actually cuts off the lights and stuff and just has the top headlight on, which is something kind of brilliant. I love stopping using the kickstand as opposed to the center stand. When it comes to innovation, Yamaha is completely right on with this. This is such a great idea for motorcycles and scooters. This one has got this kind of flat area above the headlights, and you might wonder what this is, but you can carry additional luggage here. So if you are doing a lot of courier stuff, you can put something here and it's not going to obstruct your vision. So there's these hooks here on the side that you can strap, and it goes to one side to the other, and you also have a hole here where you can use it to hook. So if you are going on a camping trip, I think that's what they had in mind. If you're going camping or you're doing adventuring, you could put like a sleeping bag and tent here because they're very light. Here it says load limit 1.5 kilograms or 3 pounds. Strap something here and just bring the hook to the other side. Very clever way of strapping down luggage. Top, you have another hook that goes through where you can, or a loop you should put your luggage, so it kind of like gets pushed against this part. Something even more interesting here that you don't have in scooters, you have a headlight there. It's a little light, it's not very powerful, but when you turn on the key, that part goes on automatically. And you can use it as a directional light to see the ground. It's aimed at the ground. And I'm not really sure if that's a really usable feature because you barely see this at night. And I have been riding at night on it. And going up to The front lever, everything is well done. You have the brakes, you have the turn signals, which are super goofy and honestly really badly located, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I do like that they're easy to replace. There's a hex here, you just remove it, put whatever blinkers you want, but it's just the position on it that is very badly designed. So here you have a very easy throttle to pull, you have a start, you have a engine kill switch, brake, and that's pretty much it. I found that Yamaha skipped out on the design. They made this bike so quirky, and then they used this round mirror that doesn't seem to go along with the design of the bike. It would have been better just to like design something a little bit more intricate, you know, something more industrial than the just round thing. I guess it mirrors the headlights, but I kind of feel like they missed an opportunity. On the left side, you have your high beams, you have your turn signals, you have a very nice short throw for the turn signals. I love that. And of course, they didn't do the goofy, weird thing of switching the horn with the turn signals as Honda tends to do. Then you have a horn here. One thing I really like about this and the PCX is the handlebars. These handlebars are higher up than the PCX. It feels like really like an off-roadish, off-road type of position, but they are very narrow, which is perfect for the bike. I find there is a downside with this, but it is more with the turn signal location, because when you turn, what tends to happen, you hit your knee on the turn signals, and that's a terrible idea. But I do like the position of the handlebars. I think it's well designed for a scooter. It's easy to ride. I just wish that they positioned the turn signals in a different location because it just gets in the way. And also notice this, you have the front hydraulic fluid and then rear, and these are combined brakes, and they are excellent. Handlebars are easy to swap out for something else. You have the Yamaha logo. I actually thought at first that this would come down and be a hook for carrying luggage or bags, but it's not here. It's much lower. You have a large, very easy to read speedometer. If you've ever seen a Yamaha Tenere, this is kind of like the same look. Look at this texture compared to this here. On this, it is just so much nicer and smooth. You have the Yamaha logo, and this just seems like out of place. Maybe I'm just being picky, but I'm like looking at it, it's like they have 3 textures on this speedometer. If you look at here, look at that. That's a nice pattern. You turn it on, you get this quick animation with this kind of revs up, and very simple setup, which is to be appreciated. And of course, it's like an industrial sort of look in a world of the touchscreens. 2 buttons, and that's all you're gonna get. Nice that they give you a tachometer up here in the top. You have a number, which is the speedometer, and then you have a trip, and you just go cycle through. You have trip B, trip 1, trip 2. You have a number here, 1356, to oil change. So that was the last time I did the oil change on it. Push it again, trip, and then that's the odometer, 3775. So this bike is basically a baby. And then right here in this corner, you have your fuel, and I'm on the last bar. Here you have your clock, 9:37. There's something interesting that happens. This bike has got valves that actuate when you're riding. So the more you rev it, there's a thing here that pops up. It's the VVA from Yamaha. I believe it's a bunch of like valves opening in the motor when you are giving it gas. When you decelerate, this kind of comes out. I honestly feel like I don't really need to know that. I think it's nice that Yamaha is showing the technology, but not really needed. And then you have a headlight and the temperature light here. This is where you fill up. You use the key, turn it, and that's how you fill up. Honestly, I think that's a bad location for the fuel fill. I much prefer it to be in the floor because most of the time I fill up when I'm like just sitting at a gas station. It doesn't take long to fill one of these up. You pull up, slide your credit card, and then fill up when you're sitting. When you're sitting, you have your knees like hit this, or you put them like this. And if you're wearing like clothes for motorcycling, it has to be bulkier. So what happens is that you have it here, you bring it here, and you're kind of like splashing around. I found that I actually overfill this way too much because of the location. I guess it is nice, but not really needed. I think it's just a bad place for a fill up. I don't like it. Definitely, I have poured fuel on the floorboards and it just gets to be kind of messy. But you know, it's a nice location. It just, it's more for getting off the bike, putting it on the center stand, and then filling it from the left side. In the middle here, Yamaha gave you a nice bag hook. These things are amazing to use, especially if you go grocery shopping. This is where the ignition is. Turn it, it'll start the bike, but it's got another interesting feature. This is usually, with the key, you have a square where you put it here and you can lock it. But Yamaha made it so you can push this button and lock it. Very convenient to use. I often don't use that on any of my bikes, but also I mistakenly hit it many times, which I don't like. I would rather have a traditional way of opening that up and closing it by using the key fob. And it is a nice feature, but not really needed. It's just nice that Yamaha did that. And this is a 2022, so you do have a USB charger right here. Another nice feature that I like is this large pocket, because you can do this. Open up the seat, you have a very nice, just push it, click to the left, and it opens up the seat. Let's see the storage space. And it opens this way. You have quite a bit of storage on this bike. It's a hard bucket. You do have, I believe, the batteries here. I haven't even had an issue with the battery. You have a serial over here, but very easy way of opening it. Now, this bike has got a very sturdy rail. I do like this more than most bikes because I like to have this so I can grab it and push it, especially if you have an off-road bike. If you do take it off-road, this is nice because you're going to be getting stuck. You need a way of lifting the bike up. This has a nice rack built in. Load limit is 11 pounds, 5 kilograms. Seat on scooters, they're okay. They're never going to be comfortable, but I find this seat to be particularly uncomfortable. It's too short, and if I sit back here, this hump actually kind of pushes you more to the front. And there's nothing wrong with it. Most of the time you're doing short trips on these things, but if you do find yourself going a long distance, this thing tends to be very uncomfortable after 50 miles. It's got these patterns here, but they don't have that for the rider. So here's a negative about the bike. So first of all, you're sitting like this, absolutely normal. But I find that this is too high because they had to create a flat floorboard. If it does feel like you're like a bear riding a unicycle. I'm 5'9", just kind of average, and I feel like I'm a little bit too big for this particular bike. So kickstand down, let me show you. This is the resting position, absolutely fine. And if you put your feet like this, you have very little distance between this, the gas cap, and the turn signals. One of the major downsides I find on this bike is this, the clearance. Your knees hit those blinkers. That's why I think they're such bad location. They could have easily put the turn signals in a different location, maybe incorporated them into the bodywork, I know that they wanted to make something, in case you drop it, it's easily replaced because it is an off-road machine. But I find that this doesn't help off-road matters. This is like a really bad design. You could bring the handlebars slightly up and that would clear it. But remember, when you're riding a motorcycle, you are wearing maybe jeans with padding, so it's going to be even more magnified. And another thing that I find bad with this bike, the floor is higher than what I would like. It really should be slightly lower to be more comfortable for most people. This always feels like you're like going up too much. Like my knees are slightly higher than my pelvis. And to be comfortable, I think you need your knees to be a little bit lower. That would help the handling as well. That's something, you know, it's not a big issue. You could just relocate these blinkers, but the floorboard, I don't think that's something that you can really fix. You could fix it by putting a large cushion under you. That way you're a little bit more comfortable, but it seems like they could have fixed this a little bit more. Also, this bike feels taller than my PCX, and I do like that. I like the visibility. It could just be the way it looks. It feels a little bit more of a commanding presence. For 10.5 foot, and it only fits here, so now you can really vary it. You don't have additional like places for your feet. You can't really put it here. The PCX, even though it's got that hump in the middle, you have a whole lot more ways of putting your legs. Let's start the bike and see how she is. This is fuel injected, by the way, so it's a very easy startup. You basically push the brake lever and there we go. Very easy startup. Here's the rear brakes. And by the way, the turn signals are louder than most turn signals. And I do appreciate that. Let's look at the headlights because the front is so polarizing, but it is cool looking. One of the best low beams I've ever seen on a bike. This, when you look at the pattern, it's cut off, it's sharp. I don't know what Yamaha did, but this is probably also one of the best scooter headlights I've seen. And when you turn on the high beam, notice that this low beam switches off and this one comes on. I think with the ADV riding community, there's been a demand for this sort of scooter. If you're upgrading from a Honda Ruckus, for example, this is the natural inclination. And one thing that's interesting, this gets about 98 miles to the gallon, and you might be impressed. But that's the same, actually the Honda PCX gets better gas mileage than this, and out of a 150, and it is smoother, more powerful. So a lot has to do with the tires, thicker, shorter tires with knobbies. So that probably will improve with like some road-oriented tires. The fuel range is about the same, 110 miles on the tank. This gets about 60 miles per hour on the speedometer. I haven't tested the actual speed. I believe it should be like 52 miles per hour or so, but it does move fairly well. It is not as quick as the Honda PCX. I don't want to just compare it back and forth because this is a completely different scooter. This really feels like it's an adventure type of scooter. If I didn't have the CRF 250, I would probably be very interested in like exploring gravel roads on this particular bike. The little short wheels don't help off-road prowess, but it is a super light bike, and if you're riding off-road, like the automatic transmission is very easy to deal with. And this is more of an urban mobility device, so it's a lot more looks oriented than other stuff. And I think people would get it just because it looks cool. I've gotten a lot of interesting compliments on this bike, and yeah, it is a cool looking bike. Got that ADV style that most people like these days, and it is a cool bike. I even like the old Yamaha Zuma 125 with the round headlights. I thought that was very interesting. These cost way too much. They're expensive scooters, and I can see why. It's a quirky scooter for people who don't want traditional scooters that look like Vespas. Well, that's the Yamaha Zuma 125. This is 2022. Great scooter, and I hope you liked the video. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.